You probably remember exactly where you were on September 11th, if you're old enough.
Yeah, I do.
What about August 11th,
Mm,
October 11th? Why do you remember the exact details of that one day versus
yeah.
all the others, right? Emotional impact. And especially growing up, when things happen to you, you've got that emotional impact, and your brain is going to be hyper focused on keeping you away from there. And again, especially as a little kid, you drew all kinds of false conclusions about yourself, your environment, people around you, all that. Your brain calculated a way to keep you safe, whatever that was for you at that time. If you're still running that same program decades later, uh, you don't even realize what that you're doing it a lot of times. You don't realize how it's impacted you, and how you shut yourself down, or guarded against things that might be able to get you out of that situation.
Hey there, and welcome to the Reclamation Room. I'm Ashana, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a space for women reclaiming themselves after narcissistic abuse. If you've ever felt like you were too much, not enough, or both at the same time, you're in the right place. I created this podcast because I know what it's like to lose yourself in overgiving, overperforming, and still wondering why it never felt like love. I've walked through trauma, toxic relationships, and the long road of self-reclamation, and I'm here to walk with you. In this podcast, we'll explore what it means to come home to yourself after the confusion and chaos of narcissistic abuse. Some episodes will be solo, others will include guest interviews. All of them will be honest, grounded, and deeply compassionate. So, whether you're just realizing what you've lived through, or you've been on this path and you're ready for the next layer of your healing, you are welcome here. This is not about perfection. This is about reclamation. So, okay, Matt Johnson,
Yes.
you are an NLP specialist, correct?
Yes.
Hypnotherapist?
A hypnotherapist, NLP coach. Yes.
Nice. Okay. How did you get into that?
About 10 years ago, I got a severe brain injury. I was hiking out at a place called Point Loma Tide Pools here in San Diego, and I slipped and landed the back of my head on a slab of solid rock. I hit so hard, my brain actually rebounded, hit the top of my skull, and I twisted the part here above my eyes, damaged my optic nerve. Brutal pain. If you've ever been zapped by electricity and felt that intense, like pins and needles type feeling, that's what was going on in my head.
So you remember the pain?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
That pain was with me for years after that. But I spent the next several years in the dark rooms. I was so sensitive to light and sound. I couldn't even be in a room with the lights on. It was just too painful. And, my kids were still small. I could hear them outside my door, but I couldn't, really be a part of their life anymore. It was tough. But
Yeah.
I started, going the medical route. I had 4 different neurologists. The first one tells me there's nothing I could do for you, and then tries to schedule me for a repeat visit. I'm like, why am I going to come back if there's nothing you could do for me? I didn't say that,
Sure.
but yeah, but it just didn't make sense to me. So on to neuro number 2, he gave me a pill that it took a little bit of the sting away. It just kind of took the edge off of it. I'm like, okay, cool. This is progress. Can you give me something to help me sleep? Because I was going through these brutal downward spirals where the pain made it hard to sleep, which made the pain worse. And just, it
Was
was,
this constant pain?
oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. But it, I, he told me there's nothing I could, nothing I could give you for sleep. So on to neuro number 3. And right away, she tells me, oh yeah, let me give you amitriptyline. And it worked.
What is that?
I don't think it's meant for sleep. I'm not a doctor. I don't really know, but she I had another in my 4th neuro tell me, I told him that story. He's like, well, she's either a genius or an idiot, because it's not it's not meant for that. I'm like, well, she must be in the former category because it worked. And
Yeah.
so, but I'm beyond grateful to all my doctors. I would not be where I am without them. The only reason I tell that story is how many people would have stopped at that first one.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean? No,
Yep.
he's a neuro. He's, got the piece of paper on the wall in the lab coat. There's nothing he can do for me. It's, I sitting in that dark room on day 2, I had hefty bags taped over the windows. I had, just total blackout. But I did something that got me out of there, and I made a decision. And the word decision comes from the Latin root de, which means from, and caedere, which means to cut. When you make a true decision, you cut off any other possibility. I knew this at the time. And so, I knew I just had to say, all right, this is where I'm going. And, my brain would find a way to get there. And, I kept flashing on a picture of me dancing at my kids' weddings. You know what I mean? It was my way of keeping my brain trained to where I wanted to go. But I spent the next probably year and a half, 2 years just going through every medical study out there, trying every harebrained treatment there was to treat a brain injury. And I came up with a 3-page document. Got everything from amino acids to hyperbaric oxygen. I gave a presentation on everything in there to the San Diego Brain Injury Foundation. If anyone is facing a brain injury, look me up. I can help you. I'll just shoot you a link to a Google Drive, no charge. But it's, the info in there has been helpful for a lot of people. About that time, though, I realized that medical science was not going to cure me, which was terrifying for me because that's all I knew. And so, despite being a total skeptic for all my life, I started looking around for, all right, what else is out there? And lucky for me, I live in California, so I had a whole lot to choose from.
Plethora.
Yeah. So I started getting into energy medicine, and one of the first things I tried was called Reiki. And I told you I had those pins and needles. And the best description I can give is she took those pins and needles and kind of made them fly in formation, if that makes sense. And it took the sting away. And I'm like, whoa, I have no idea what you're doing, but please don't stop. And so at the end of the session, I asked her, can you teach me how to do that? And so I spent several days with her, got trained up in Reiki. I went on to pranic healing, Qigong, Silva holistic faith healing, just anything I could find that helped me. I tried to just dive in and get good at it. And I started to turn the tide. I was making huge amounts of progress, healing. And over the next couple of years, I was able to start getting out and, doing stuff. I had my hat and dark glasses and noise canceling headphones on. It looked like I was going to a shooting range, but
But you were there. You were
yeah.
Yeah.
I was out of that dark room, which was cool. But I wasn't really able to live my life. You know what I mean? Loud sounds would happen and things like that. And it was like a baseball bat to the back of the head. And so, every time something like that would happen, it was like I was re-injuring my brain all over again. So I had to start all over again. It was not a good situation. So at this point, I'm thinking, do I have permanent damage? And so I looked, I was looking for a way to figure that out, and I came across a special type of brain scan. An MRI will look at the tissue, which, unless you've got something really wrong with you, doesn't tell you a lot for a brain injury. What I found was called a SPECT scan done by Dr. Daniel Amen, who's famous in brain circles. He's written a ton of books, but a SPECT scan will actually map the electrical activity in the brain. And so, long story short, I go in and my brain was okay, but areas that were supposed to be dark were lit up like fireworks. And I discovered I had PTSD. Right away, I realized why my brain wasn't healing. It's with a brain injury, the name of the game is to bring your brain waves down, to give it a chance to rest and repair itself. My PTSD was keeping me in fight or flight and sabotaging the whole healing process. So I knew if I wanted to beat the brain injury, I had to heal the PTSD first. I had absolutely no clue how to do that. But I'd always known I had anxiety and depression issues. I dealt with that all my life. And I just never had given it that label of PTSD before. I thought that was something soldiers get, you know what I mean? But at that point, I'd been to, 3 different talk therapists. I tried the meds and all that. And I just, wonderful tools for a lot of people, but I knew that wasn't my path. It was like a garden hose against the tide. But so again, start looking for what else is out there. Lucky for me, I was familiar with the incredible power of hypnosis when my dad quit smoking. He had tried for 30 years to quit pills, patches, gums, you name it. Failed every single time until he got hypnotized. One session, and he told me he never even crave cigarettes again. That's how powerful it is. I was also familiar with NLP, or Neuro-Linguistic Programming, through a guy named Tony Robbins. Tony famously had a woman that had 152 different personalities. And he was actually able to integrate her right there on the spot in about 45 minutes. I mean, that's the power of this stuff. So knowing this, I just kind of dove in and, I got quadruple certified in, hypnotherapy and NLP. And I asked every instructor I had the exact same question, how do you heal PTSD? And they all tried to help me, but none of them really had the answer. So back to the internet again. And for the next 2.5 years, I went on a deep dive, just binging every course, every book I could find, and I fell in love. I was learning from, the masters in both fields, and I love geeking out on this stuff, as you can probably tell, because, due to my long-winded story. But
I can
um,
relate. It's
I,
fine.
I, yeah, I finally put together, after that 2.5 years, a protocol to finally heal myself. And about 6 months later, I finally healed my brain injury. I can be in the light again. And that is the long-winded story of how I got into this stuff.
I love it though, because let me tell you why. It
Okay.
goes perfectly with the show that you're on today.
Yeah.
Because when you were telling your story, I was like, what metaphor here? Like traumatic brain injury, that's very tangible. That's very like I can place when it happened, right? Like
Hmm.
a thing happened and I'm carrying it forward with me. It's pain. I can't come out into the world. I can't do the things that I want to do. And when you shared about making a decision and you shared the root of the word decision, this is a show for women healing from traumatic abuse. And it's like there has to come a point where you decide that something is worth making that decision. And like you said, you were envisioning your children's weddings. Of course, that's
Yes.
worth it.
Yes.
But we can be in this dark room sometimes after what we've been through. And it's like we don't see a way out. We don't see a point in even trying. We went to that first neuro and it was like, no, okay, well, there's no hope for us. Maybe we went to the second one and we got a little bit of help. We have
Hmm.
these self-help books, right? We TikTok videos. We tried the new nervous system hack. We feel a little bit better, but we just are resigned to this idea that maybe there's not much more for me. Maybe
Yeah.
this is just what my life is going to be like. And I'm listening to your story and I'm like, I hope that the listeners are hearing this and applying it in some way to like, have I been in that dark room? Have I been thinking that this was the last choice for me? Have I been looking at the medical field and the diagnosis and the hopelessness that I've carried forward with me? Can I make a decision? What can that decision be? And sometimes it's just the decision of how you're going to view your situation. Sometimes that's enough in that moment. But I'm listening to how you got here and I'm like, this is incredible. Because along the way, here's another thing that I picked out. Along the way to finding what worked for you and your
Hmm.
solution, which is huge, right? It may not be what's for everyone else. You also got these really cool qualifications, these
Hmm.
really cool gifts, these really cool things that you can share with the world in a way that really only you can because of what you've been through.
True.
So I'm here for this. I love this story. So, okay. It was constant pain.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so the pain was why you couldn't be around the lights and the noises. It hurt worse.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
As you were talking, I was like, that's PTSD. Like, that's literally what it's like walking around the world with PTSD. And it manifested through your brain injury. So, was this like past trauma too that was kind of compounded with the brain injury?
Yeah, it was childhood, and I'd known I wasn't right. I knew I had severe social anxiety, hypervigilance, and severe anxiety, depression, all that. And I had just never really put two and two together and figured out, oh wait, these are PTSD symptoms. I knew little to nothing about it at the time, and in a way, the brain injury wound up being a blessing, and I do not want another one. But yeah,
One is enough, but thank you.
yeah, yeah. But if I hadn't gotten it, I never would have realized I had PTSD, and I never would have found my calling. You know what I mean? I absolutely love this stuff, and it's a privilege to work with people every day. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
I have a life now that I never would have even believed,
Hmm.
before I got the injury. But
Yeah, because trauma does that, right? Like we get
oh
this
yeah.
tunnel vision and we're like, this is
Yeah,
it. What is
absolutely.
it?
Especially when you're talking like, hurt people. You know what I mean? If someone's hurting you, they're probably just replaying what was done to them in some version. Especially when something happens to you as a child, like it did to me. Um, it if you're a soldier on the battlefield and you get your scars there, you're an adult for the most part. Your personality is pretty much formed, but as a child, you're still drawing conclusions about yourself. You're forming your identity. Human beings 0 to 7 are in what's called the imprinting phase, which means your brain's taking in huge amounts of data and it's shaping you. It's shaping who you are, but you haven't developed what's called your critical faculty yet, which means you can't judge what's coming in yet. So is this a happy person? Are mom and dad fighting because of me, or they just got their own stuff going on? You know what I mean? That kind of thing. We draw so many false conclusions about ourselves. I shut myself down for so many years after that. And looking back, it's obvious, but when you're in it, it's a lot harder to spot.
Yep.
You know,
Isn't it always that way?
oh
Looking
yeah,
back, you're like,
absolutely.
"Oh, crap."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a coach who, I work with and she's able to spot things that I can't to this day, you know what I mean? Because it's always hard to see in yourself.
Even you could even be pointing it out in someone else. Like I've done this and I got on my own nerves because I would see it in someone else until that day
Yes.
came and I was like, oh, that's
Yes.
bothering me because oh, okay, that's uncomfortable.
So common though, because it's called projection. You know what I mean? That thing that you don't like in somebody else, there's something in you that you don't like. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So, so you asked all these people, because you went on a journey, man, the hero's journey, and you
About
asked
6 years total.
people, 6 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you asked them, like, how do you heal PTSD?
Uh-huh.
You said that they shared some things that maybe helped a little.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they all tried to help. The thing about it is unless you I found this out when I started going out and researching it. There's so little information out there on, so few techniques on how to help people with that kind of thing. And, I'll speak from my experience. My PTSD, there are many, many layers to it. There's, when I'm working with somebody, the first thing I always try to do is calm that fight or flight response, because that's really how you can get in and start working with the programming. As long as those defenses are up,
Oh
then
yeah.
change
Oh
work
yeah.
is really
Yeah.
hard to do. You know
The
what I
scared
mean?
brain is not a learning brain.
Yeah, exactly. But that stuff is lodged in the subconscious mind. It's in that programming like we talked about. And I told you I've been to 3 therapists and all that. They were trying to work with my conscious mind, which
Mhm.
by the time you hit 30 years old, up to 95% of all your day-to-day behaviors are directed by your subconscious. If you think back to the first time you drove a car, your hands were 10 and 2 and you were super focused on not hitting anything, right? You had to be. Fast forward a few years, you got coffee in one hand, cell phone in the other, right? And I'm kidding, please don't do that. But um, that
That
shows
happened
the
over here.
process. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
most of us have had the experience of driving and realizing we haven't even been paying attention, right? How did you not crash? Because your subconscious learned how to drive through repetition, right? That's the process. Very cool for driving, but problems can happen when we teach it things that we don't want. Bad habits, limiting beliefs, negative emotions, things like that. When those get lodged in there, that's when hypnosis and NLP can really go in and, those are the tools to go in and rewrite that programming where it lives.
Yeah.
But I tried all the stuff. Our culture has this thing where if you got any kind of a problem, go to a therapist. And
Mhm.
beautiful techniques. It's a wonderful thing for a lot of people. Just in my particular case, it just they weren't. I don't want to say not qualified, but they weren't informed on what was going on with me. I never even got a diagnosis out of any of the three of them.
Really?
But yeah,
That's
but
interesting.
yeah, yeah, but it you know there, like I said, there's so little information out there. You've really got to do a deep dive in order to find it and become an expert on it. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more pop up. People dealing with that kind of thing, but it's still very, very rare. You've got to
Yeah.
really want it. I can tell you that firsthand.
Yeah, I was reading recently they've actually changed the coding, the manual of how to diagnose PTSD. So they've kind of made it a little bit easier to get the diagnosis, but it's still really vague. Like there's certain categories that you have to be experiencing, like one out of this category, two out of this
Yeah.
category, three. So it's so different for every person, the way that it manifests, the
Yes.
way that it's showing in their life. And in a great moment, you could have no idea.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it happens later. And so being conscious, like you said, it happens in that subconscious mind a lot of times. So we could have things that are happening in our life that we're not even consciously aware of that we're doing.
Oh yeah. It
So
happens all the time. All the time.
yeah.
It's, by definition, it's outside your conscious awareness, subconscious, right?
So,
And go ahead.
well, I was just wondering what was the, I don't, it may not work this way. So tell me if it doesn't.
Okay.
You went down this rabbit hole. You learned all these things, this
Mhm.
hero's journey. If you could pinpoint one first step, and I think I already know what you're going to say, but what would be the first step to actually healing PTSD in the way that you can help people?
Like I said, the first step is really bringing down that fight or flight response. You know what I
Okay.
mean? And hypervigilance, whatever that looks like for you. That when we can bring those defenses down and your brain realizes no longer in threat, then that's when the change work can happen. Your brain is the most incredible computer ever created, but it has three main layers. You have your reptile brain, which is called, in geek speak, it's called your amygdala, but it controls fight or flight. Should I eat it, run from it, mate with it, whatever? Its only concern is keeping you alive for the next 2 seconds and passing on your genes. That's all it cares about.
Yep.
Above that, you have your mammal brain for that. Think of your dog and understands love, family, the pack, whatnot, whereas some reptiles will eat their young, right? That's the difference
Yeah.
between the two brain layers. Above that, you have your neocortex, which is all your higher order logic thinking. When you're in stress, especially in an extreme situation, your body will physically drain blood from the brain to give it to the limbs. And that neocortex, that top logical part, will actually shut down. And guess who's in charge at that point, right? The one that wants to keep you alive. So, I mean, I deal with this so often. This is why I'm saying this. When you're in an extreme stress situation, you're, again, that logic center is shut down. Your reptile's in charge. It makes a calculation on how to keep you alive for the next 2 seconds. And whatever that calculation is what you're going to do. I've dealt with so many people who have been in, I had one guy, when he was a kid, he comes home from school and his dad's got his mom at gunpoint, and he just walks by. And, he was kicking himself for years after that. Why didn't I do something? I'm like, you weren't thinking, your reptile brain was. You know what I mean? And again, that can be a war zone to asking a pretty girl out on a date and something stupid comes out of your mouth. You know what I mean? But that again, it's learning to recognize it in yourself. Hey, my I'm not a doctor. I don't diagnose this stuff. I help people with the symptoms and the subconscious processes that are going on, driving that kind of thing. But I would say when you have a response that's out of proportion to the stimulus, right? I'll give you an extreme example. Like, we've all had, a smell bring us back, fresh cut grass or, cookies baking or something like that, bring us back to a point in time, memory wise. Someone who's been attached can smell the same cologne and, go right back. That's classic. But it's again, if your responses are out of proportion to the stimulus, you get triggered or overreacting, something like that. That's a clue.
Yeah. Or even if it's more what someone might consider calm, but it's bothersome to you and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm not handling this in the way that I want to be handling this.
Yes. That I love that. Yeah. I'm not handling this the way I want to be, handling that. Yeah. And when some people like being high strung, you know what I mean? That's just their thing. That's fine. But, it's really, making, your nervous system what you want it to be. That's what I help people with all the time.
Yeah, befriending the processes so that you can function in life as the person that you want to be showing up as. That's again circling back around to when you're in that dark room. That's
Yeah.
not how you want to be showing up in life. We
Oh,
want to be
definitely
able to
not.
look at the light. We want to be able to see colors and hear sounds and use our senses and have that
Yeah.
work to our benefit. We're here to experience joy and to have connection with people. So this is
Yes.
so important. So, okay. So thinking of the listeners here,
Mhm.
what we might have been through, and we're hearing, okay, I really want to get out of this fight or flight response. What might that look like in a session or in relation with someone? Like, what are some ways that how do you do what you do?
I can give you some really quick first aid right here if you'd like.
Yeah.
All right. So think of, for everyone listening, if you're driving, please don't close your eyes. You can, pause this and come back to it later or whatnot. You don't have to close your eyes for this, but think of something that causes that stress, and maybe, hopefully not something too scary, maybe let's say aim for like a 5 out of 10 or
Ease
something
into
like
it. Dip
that.
your toes.
Overdue bill, conversation you don't want to have, whatever. But think of whatever causes that stress and then feel that come up in your body. All right. Now, where are you holding that? Point to it. Right. Now, in your mind's eye, you can close your eyes if you can do so safely, but in your mind's eye, if that feeling had a color, what color would it be? First impression. Is there more than one color? Now, taking that color, notice if it has a shape. What shape would it be? First impression, first thing that pops in your head is usually the right answer. All right. Now, taking those colors, those shapes, if they were moving, if they're in motion, what direction would they be turning? Now, if it's hard to tell, try turning it one way than the other, see what feels more natural. And then once you find the direction, try turning it the opposite way. See what happens to it. See what happens to that feeling. Now, find the way that feels best for you, whatever that is, maybe the way that feels most peaceful. And you can spin it up in that new direction if you like, if that makes you feel better, while you drain all that color right out of it. Just make it totally transparent in there. And then fill it back up with whatever color you like. Some people like gold or pink, green or blue, whatever feels most peaceful for you. And still spinning it in your favorite direction, try adding sparkle to it. Want to start to swirl throughout like a candy cane or one of those poles in front of a barber shop. Notice what that does to the feelings. What we've just done is taken a subconscious process. Your subconscious mind controls everything in your body, your breathing, heartbeat, body temperature, how much insulin you create after a meal. It also controls that pit in your stomach, that feeling of fear or anxiety or stress, whatever that is. We've just given that a visual component. And once we do that, we can now communicate to your subconscious, hey, let's handle it this way from now on. And you can use that. I use the unspinning fear technique all the time. I give out NLP techniques in my free content. That's what I'll do. And that was the technique that I used for my very first Facebook Live. Take a wild guess why I picked that one. I was doing it the entire time.
Wow.
But like a couple minutes into it, I was actually having fun.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I could tell listening to you, you're having fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
But this stuff it's so fascinating. Just a simple visualization can, really change things for people. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
What I loved about it listening to you, because this is very similar to like how I've kind of talked people through things too. So like when you brought in color, I'm like, dude, yeah, is this NLP? Like I get it. I'm on the same wavelength. I love that it creates safe distance.
Hmm.
We're not so much identifying with that experience that we're in. Now we're able to observe it. We're able to communicate with it. Like I think that's what brings that felt sense of safety
Hmm.
to calm that response.
It gives you control over the process. Right. And I, help people with, that unspinning fear that we just did. I help people with, intrusive thoughts, which is another big one. Just it's taking control of those subconscious processes. And, it is such a life-changing experience when you do that. Again, it's that 95% behind the wheel. And so you try to change yourself with just that 5%, you've got an uphill battle. You know what I mean? You could do it, but it is not easy. But it's when you gain that control, you can become the person you want to be. Absolutely. If you don't mind me circling back, you talked about like, women who were stuck in a bad situation. I have been there. I escaped it. It was not easy. I know this. But again, I was a teenager and I did exactly, not knowing this consciously, I did the exact same thing. I decided I'm out of here. And, again, I had no clue what that was going to look like, but what happens when you make that decision is you will actually change the things that you notice. You'll change the things that you'll attempt. There was a fascinating study where they took two groups of people. One reported they were very lucky, and the other reported they were very unlucky. And one by one, they took them to a restaurant, left a $20 bill on the floor right in front of them in plain sight. Without exception, the lucky people all spotted the 20, and also without exception, all the unlucky people missed it, just filtered it right out because of that belief that unlucky people don't find $20 bills. In geek speak, that's called a perceptual filter. And we've probably, all had the experience of, buying a car or test driving a car. All of a sudden you start seeing that car pop up everywhere,
Yep.
right? That's your brain tuning into that. Oh, hey, that's important. You had an emotional
Mhm.
experience
You
doing
should
that,
notice
right?
this.
But we do that all the time. We filter out, things that we don't, believe, or things that, aren't, we don't think that are part of our experience, if that
Mhm.
makes any sense.
This is interesting. So I'm turning this around in my mind and I'm like, so where prior we had filtered out things that might actually be safe, but they were unfamiliar to us. And so
Mhm.
we've filtered in all the danger, all the threats, like the
Yes.
hypervigilance, like, oh my gosh, everything's scary. We actually are in control enough to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to filter out those scary things and I'm going to focus more on the things that are safety, that
Hmm.
are, maybe it's unfamiliar, maybe it's a leap of faith and that decision of like, I've got to do something differently here to be in a different situation. But
Yeah.
like you said, like we're going to start noticing different things and we're effectively training our brain to go
Yes.
where we want it to go.
Yes.
Mm.
You probably remember exactly where you were on September 11th, if you're old enough.
Yeah, I do.
What about August 11th?
Mm,
October 11th. Why do you remember the exact details of that one day versus
yeah.
all the others, right? Emotional impact. And especially growing up, when things happen to you, you've got that emotional impact, and your brain is going to be hyper focused on keeping you away from there. And again, especially as a little kid, you drew all kinds of false conclusions about yourself, your environment, people around you, all that. Your brain calculated a way to keep you safe, whatever that was for you at that time. If you're still running that same program decades later, uh, you don't even realize what that you're doing it a lot of times. You don't realize how it's impacted you, and how, you shut yourself down, or, guarded against things that, might be able to get you out of that situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because when you said September 11th, of course, I know where I was, right? And I'm thinking, I'm like, I was young enough that September 11th wasn't that scary to me because I couldn't really grasp what was happening.
Okay.
But the people around me, they were afraid. They were
Yeah.
frightened. There was an energy of fear around me, and my brain still was like, this is significant. You need to pay attention. I
Yeah.
think that's really important too, because a lot of times we'll gaslight ourselves and be like, there's nothing to be stressed out about here.
Yeah.
There might have been at one time, even if it wasn't scary for you. If you're attuned to someone and they're scared, you may pick up on that and decide that we need to be alert in this situation.
Yeah.
That's subconscious.
Yes, absolutely. If you've ever seen that movie Inside Out, the cartoon movie, they had a really good NLP person for it. I know the model they were working with. But,
Wow.
when those experiences get stored as, okay, this is a threat and this is a response
Mhm.
to it, then that stuff can automatically come back out of us. I use the example, you're probably not there yet, but most of us have had the horrifying experience of having our parents' words come out of our mouths, right? Even though we swore we would never, be like them. But that gets stored in the subconscious as, hey, here's the situation, that this is a response to it, good, bad, indifferent. The subconscious doesn't know. It's a computer. So here's a response. All right. And so when it sees a similar situation years later, right, and it's going back to that fresh cut grass or the baking cookies, taking you back, it doesn't have to make sense, especially consciously. It just has to make sense to the subconscious and whatever's programmed in there. It says, "Oh, hey, I know the situation. Here's a response to it. That's what's going to come out of you." And so, again, that's another one of those situations where we can do things that don't make any sense consciously, but to the subconscious, it makes perfect sense.
What I'm hearing here also, which another reason why I love this conversation is be easy on yourself.
Yes.
Like, like
Yes.
don't shame yourself. Don't like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me, which I've done. I know we probably all do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You were not born knowing this stuff. None of us were. Right. And so, when your personality was formed, when your triggers were formed, when your map of the world, basically, you weren't conscious of any of this stuff. It's mostly trial and error, the process that, creates your personality. And
Mhm.
so, if you've got problems, take a look back at, who were you? who are the people around you that form in those formative years, especially 0 to 7, but it could be any time. But, are they people who I want to be like? Or do they have the life I want? Do they have the success I want? Whatever that is. And if not, then that's, you want to start looking again at, all right, what are my reactions to things? What am I, shutting myself down? What are the $20 bills that I'm filtering out of my own life?
Yes. Yes. And you have the power to change it. And this brings me to an interesting nuance too that we come to in this show a lot, because I'm thinking like we're looking back at those people. We don't want to necessarily be like those people. Maybe that's a belief system I don't want to carry anymore.
Hmm.
We always have the people who are in the other camp and they're like, you can't blame them for everything. Oh my God, they're human too. And it's like, yes. And the same applies to them. They might have been carrying things that they didn't want to carry anymore. And so there's a unique sense of compassion that I've found a lot of my listeners have, where they're like, but I can put myself in the abuser's shoes or in the person that I'm afraid of or the toxic relationship. I can really understand their side of it. So I'll just keep, maybe I can help them. I'm wondering if you've encountered that in any of your work and like rewiring that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the analogy I like to use is, can you think of that person as a perfect little baby, right? They were born knowing nothing but love. You know what I mean? At some point, somebody took that away from them, right? Hurt people hurt people. So if someone's done something horrible to you, uh, they're just replaying what was done to them, in some form. And it when you realize, I mean, this the fortitude that it takes to get past this stuff,
Yeah.
you can have some compassion for them, right? Because not everybody's cut out to do it. And well, anyone can. It's just, again, you have to decide.
Hmm.
But it's a journey, you know what I mean? And not, I run into people who, this is pretty common. The abuser or whatnot just won't even broach the subject. You know what I mean? I can't talk about that. That's off limits. You know what I mean? That is them not. What's happening is there's an identity issue that they have. That's not congruent with the identity that they want to have, and so they again, they just want to filter it right out and not talk about it. Realize it's they know what they did, and they're fully aware of it, but they don't have the courage to talk about it, because that could bring up some really nasty stuff. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
again, long-winded answer again, but when you can see them as, kind of in, similar shoes to
Yeah.
you know what I mean? They dealt with something, and their reaction wasn't the greatest. What do you want yours to be? Right? I deal with a lot of people who are just they're terrified of passing on, what happened to their kids. And yeah, it's taking control of that 95% behind the wheel, and really reprogramming, who do I want to be, how do I want to react, how I want to show up for my kids. And I find that we'll always do more for other people than we'll do for ourselves. Most of us will anyway. And so when you think about, all right, what impact do I want to have on my kids? Going back to that dark room, I saw my dad, when I was 8 years old, he got in a bad accident and wasn't able to work. And I saw him just kind of swirl down the drain. You know what I mean? His attitude was negative, and I hold nothing against him for that. It's, he had every right to be, but I watched how his attitude just kind of brought him down. You know what I mean? And I didn't want to be that way. And so yeah, he was a great role model for me in that, because I knew there's a chance my kids deal with their own dark night of the soul at some point. And so I wanted to be a good role model of, how do you overcome that? What did dad do? And, when you think in those terms, how are my kids going to look back at this? What reactions am I programming into them? That usually gives people the motivation to get started.
Hmm. Yeah, there's such a difficult balance here. Like, and sometimes like my brain is like, "Drrr," and I'm like, okay, pull it out. Come on, like say this in words. A lot of times we have to find something bigger than ourselves or outside of ourselves to pull
Yes.
us out, because we
Mhm.
may not have that belief that we're worth it or that we can even do it.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling like if you don't have kids, you know, if your childhood was awful and maybe you can't even grasp onto that, that's how I don't want to be. Maybe it's that state of hopelessness of like, what's the point of even deciding how I want to be? I
Hmm.
feel like you might even be able to help someone with that feeling.
It when you don't have like an external motivation there, what you have to do is really get in touch with what you value. And that is a very large topic. But it's the basis for what we do. And I'm not talking about religion or anything like that here. I'm talking about what do you value as a person, and what do you want your life to look like? I always tell people you only got so many trips around the sun. When you're sitting in your rocking chair at 95, looking back at your life, what do you want to see? And just reverse engineer from there. But it's you've got if you don't have kids, you can go volunteer at a soup kitchen or a dog shelter or whatever appeals to you, whatever lights you up. It's going to be different for everybody, but you just got to find what would motivate you. If you want to become emotionally fit, get out of yourself, right? Find
Yeah,
something to contribute to. And that is going to give you, that's where meaning comes from, in my opinion. It's,
absolutely.
we're all here together. We're all in this together. And so when you can go out and really help people make a difference in their life, it is so rewarding.
It pulls you out of that tunnel vision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh, this is such a good conversation. So, Matt, I'm wondering if there is anything that you would like to share about your work or maybe any offers that you have right now. How can people find you?
Oh, sure. You can go to Matt Johnson NLP. That's MattJohnson and NLP for Neuro-Linguistic Programming.com. There I have a free NLP course where we unspin the fear like we did a few minutes ago. We deal with the intrusive thoughts, procrastination, imposter syndrome. It's basically a top 10 of my most requested items. I'll give you a cool NLP exercise for each of them. And really, it's the work in itself is transformational, but it's just a taste of what's available. If you want to book a call with me, that'll be on the site too. We can, do a deep dive into what your issues are. I give a free call where we just come up with a strategy on how to create, how to become the person you want to become,
Yeah.
basically. And I'm launching in the very near future a subscription, kind of like the Netflix for healing.
Ah, I love that.
It's called Limitless by Design. It's I mentioned I had shut myself down and all those for all those years, and a lot of people I deal with are in a similar boat. And this is taking uh, your life, basically health, wealth, relationships, emotional freedom, all that, and just taking that subconscious programming and creating what you want from it. Every month has a different theme. January is hitting your New Year's resolutions, February's relationships, and so on. But it's really, I was inspired by the book No Limits by John Maxwell. If you've ever, a phenomenal book, but he talks about just taking your life and, blow the cap off your capacity is what
Yeah.
says. That's what I'm trying to do with the subscription. But yeah, you can get all that on the website.
I'm going to link it in the show notes too.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
really like I love doing deep dives with people. You know what I mean? And this really, I mean, I'm purposely keeping the price of it low. It's $7 for the first 30-day trial, and then 27 a month after. I'm keeping it low because I want to have that type of an impact with people. Once people get into the work, they realize what's possible for them, and it's. I can't even describe, what life was like on the other side.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
want everybody to experience that.
I love everything that you stand for. Every time you're talking, I'm like, yes, I believe this too. So I would love to stay in touch. I would love to like keep up to
Sure.
date on what you're doing, maybe have you back on to talk about that when it launches.
I would love that too. Yeah. Thank you.
That'd be
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. Birds of a
Okay.
feather.
I know. Okay. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. Yeah. I could tell you and I are very similar. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like I can keep talking to. I'm like, okay, you're on a show. So, okay, Matt, it was really awesome to meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I very much appreciate this. And yeah, anytime I can, help you or anything like that, just let me know.
Perfect. Thank you, friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for spending time in the Reclamation Room. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if this supported you, consider sharing it or leaving a review. You're not alone, and your reclamation is sacred.